I think I'm going to call today's build Nixi, Mother of Dragons. She might not be much of a Khaleesi, but she definitely has multiple dragons and quite a lot of damage. Unlike my previous Autobomber Averon, I went into this with no real plan at all. Just, I was playing Nixi, I had a sign that increased my attack speed, and I was going to see what I got. And oh boy did it get spicy quickly due to my aggressive rerolling. Most of my gear was optimized more for rerolls than gameplay, which sometimes can be a gamble and leads to bad runs, but hey, that's the game sometimes. And if you want to know more about the other builds that I've played in Death Must Die, you'll find several down below. And be sure to get subscribed, leave a like while you're down there, because there's probably going to be more Death Must Die content coming in the future. But for now, let's get into today's build. Because my gear was optimized for rerolls, I decided to reroll until I got high rarity boons, like Dive. And I'll admit, this is my first time using Dive in a serious way, so I wanted to max it out, dash over stuff, and watch it explode. Spoiler alert, Dive isn't very good, but it was good enough at least to clear the early skeletons, and sometimes that's all you need. Then about 50 seconds in, I got to reroll again, and got 15% attack speed, which is pretty darn good. So now, once I hit level 30, it'll be 115% attack speed? Attacking over twice as fast? Hell yeah, sign me up. Attacking fast always feels great. And I kept going. Got an enhancing dash. I wasn't really noticing Dive doing all that much, but I figured, it'll get better later. And going into this, I was like, I don't know if I want to play Warpedstrike Nixi again. Sure, it's really synergistic, but I've done that a lot. Now I played Warpedstrike Nixi again. 215, it came up. I rerolled. I took it. Yeah, call me weak if you want, or you could say that just has really strong synergy with the character. And so that's what we're going to do from now on. Speaking of rerolling until you get something good, oh look, a dragon! Yep, dragon build now. I had an Onyx dragon for my relic, now I have the red dragon. Who knows, maybe winter would give me the white dragon as well, or I think it's blue dragon, or maybe it's a white eyes blue dragon. Oh wait, no, never mind, that's a card from Backpack Battles. I'm getting totally confused. Either way, I didn't get the second dragon, unfortunately, though that would have been really cool for the recording. But because I had two dragons, I might as well pick up Summoner and kind of sit back. The real test of this was on the slimes. Ring of Frost was working pretty well to disable any slime that came too close to me, and the dragons themselves were doing massive amounts of AoE. Normally, a dragon will kill everything within its breath range, but its damage kind of gets limited by its attack rate. In this case, because there were two and they weren't always attacking in sync, the damage was just a constant torrent of fire and noxious fumes, which the enemies couldn't take. So I was feeling pretty good. But I also didn't have summoner gear on, and I wasn't sure that I could pull off a pure summon build without Mort or without some sort of other summon. So I decided I'm going to keep going and doing some damage myself, especially since Ring of Frost is disabling enemies. Including on the gargoyles, where I felt like I was melting them. But honestly, it's probably the dragons melting them and I'm just kind of there being the cheerleader. But hey, every time I hit them, I generate experience, and experience helps me level up, and leveling up gets me attack speed, so I'm going to keep hitting stuff as much as I can. And in some of the combat waves after the gargoyles was again when I noticed that not only was I attacking fast enough to consistently freeze stuff around me, but because my dragons perpetually desynced, they were doing a really good job of clearing everything up. Far better, in fact, than a lot of the previous dragon builds I had, which I only ended up with one dragon. At 8:30, the chatty skeleton wasn't so chatty once he was frozen solid, which makes me happy because, honestly, he's an asshole. As I kept going, I kept getting to scale my attack speed, not only increasing the boon from the Moirai, but of course, leveling up and gaining more and more from my sign, to a point where my freeze was going off before stuff even got to properly approach me, which was awesome because it led to a really nice sense of safety. Almost a deceptively good one, because this build isn't tanky at all, it just doesn't get hit. If you get hit, you're going to lose a lot of health. But if you never get hit, you never take damage, you functionally have infinite health. So the run was already going pretty good. But around 10:25 it got really crazy because I got a second Shrine of Music and selected passive EXP gain. I think EXP gain is super impactful. Not only do the extra levels really make a difference in the mid and late game where you need the power most, but it also just helps with a lot of run consistency. So much so that I decided to double it with my Withering Tree. Yes, I know, all the boons would be low rarity, but I'll have a ton of EXP to rank up the ones where that rarity actually matters. And in most cases, it honestly didn't at that point. I already had a lot of really good damage, and it was more about accumulating as many bonuses as I could get, especially going into the 12-minute slime wave, which I was a little bit worried about because outside of a dragons, I didn't have any AoE, but then again, I had 2 dragons and I was freezing everything. And yep, as it turns out, having 2 dragons and freezing everything was exactly what I needed. Let's see how this strategy does against stabby ghosts. Yep, they're permanently frozen as well. Perfect. I guess instead of being stabby ghosts, they're just really mean-looking snowmen. I'm sure a little dragon fire will melt the frowns right off their faces. But okay, the Necromancer came up at 14 minutes, and I was really worried going into this one because I have a bad habit of standing in stuff as melee and shotgunning myself to the face with Necromancer blasts. Luckily, when I have higher attack speed, I tend to be able to destroy his projectiles, just passively auto-attacking him in the face, or more likely manually attacking so that my auto-attack doesn't decide to target some random ad behind me and leave me vulnerable. But I found in this case, it was totally fine. Not only was I absolutely obliterating his health bar, but I was barely getting hit. And this was one of the most satisfying Necromancer kills I've had in a long time. Maybe Summoner Maris was more fun, because in that case, the summons just beat him to death. And it's kind of ironic to watch a Necromancer get beaten to death by undead minions that aren't his. However, this was also really fun, because who doesn't like freezing a Necromancer and then thawing him with a dragon? Now, I've played a lot of Warpedstrike builds before, but this one was absolutely my favorite, because most of the Warpedstrike builds that I played in the past, and I'm not counting things here that use Warpedstrike just for the EXP bonuses or as utility, I'm talking about main damage Warpedstrike. I maxed out Warpedstrike, and I really focused in on gem high. So I'd generate a bunch of gems and try to do as much damage as possible before the buff fell off. When you stack gem high up, you attack super fast, 10 attacks per second easily. But then you lose all that speed and you're very vulnerable. If you don't have any gems to collect, it becomes a semi-stressful minigame where you hope you left some gems behind to collect them so your bonus doesn't fall off right before the bosses, because most of the bosses have a bit of a gap in the enemies before them. But this one had consistently high attack speed and a surprising amount of safety from the freezes. I actually think that while Winter is regarded as one of the weaker goddesses, she's actually really good if you can permanently disable enemies. It just takes a little bit more work to get to that place, and this build utilized her buffs perfectly. And a great example of this occurred at 18 minutes with the Ice Archers. I could always dash towards them and instantly freeze them, and then it was stabby time. Normally, I'm hoping they don't freeze me, and they don't freeze me in a bad place like an AoE from all the Armored Knights. But in this case, I didn't have to worry at all, because I was the thing freezing them, and I could be super aggressive. It was so successful that I think for the first time ever, I didn't get hit by any of them, even with the triple proj. Fairly sure the only time I've done that before is when I did the no-hit run. And at 19 minutes, we've got the last gauntlet. My dragons tore through the frozen skeletons like White Walker extras from Game of Thrones Season 8. But on a happier note, it's Dracula time! He was a bit scary, because I was still very squishy, and early on I was taking way more hits than I should have, but I was also chewing through his health like nobody's business, especially when I froze him solid, and enabled my almost 100% damage bonus. And since that's frozen enemies take increased damage, it's not only my stabs that are doing more, but also the dragons. And everyone loves enemies taking more damage from their dragons, or at the very least I do. So right after I took down Dracula, Summer came in for a nice motivational speech. Better late than never, and I guess I can't blame her too much because she did give me the dragon at the start. So, much like with the Averon Auto Bomber, I don't know if this is a build you should really go out of your way to target, because getting a legendary boon isn't all that easy to do. However, it was extremely fun. You could do Winter plus Crom, for example. His Chains of War would synergize really well with a high attack speed, or alternatively, you could go with Mort and Soul Stealers. I'm sure having Mayhem to build up a bunch of generic bonuses would have given me a lot of damage as well. Most of my spell damage and summon damage came from blessings. I was acting under the assumption that the spell damage transferred over to the dragons, but I genuinely don't know if their spells are attacks, so the spell damage blessing that I put 5 ranks into could have actually been a giant waste of levels. But because I was able to reroll so much, my gear let me do a surprising amount of damage from my level 1 Warpedstrike. And as it turns out, if you have a really good weapon, you don't need to level up your attack for it to do a reasonable amount of damage, assuming that you invest everything into attacking super quickly. It also turns out that dive was a complete waste of levels, but hey, it looked pretty and the run was smooth enough that I didn't mind. The Meteor Shower and Blight weren't really for damage, they were more for statuses. Meteor Shower in case I wanted to have the burning patches when burning enemies died, and Blight just to freeze more stuff. So I wasn't too worried about the damage they did, but I'd say both were respectable. As I've been playing more Death Must Die, and as I've been winning 30 difficulty runs more consistently, I'm looking less and less for the best or most optimal build. Instead, I'm looking for something cool, based on an item, or a fun effect that just happens to work. I recently tried out the God Rage Axe as well, and found that unfortunately, that one isn't too good. While a chance to proc God Rage on hit and get a bunch of meteors is cool in theory, in practice it was just never active when I needed it the most. Though I am on the lookout for other cool items, like a plus attack projectile staff to go Sign of a Helper Maris, or an item that says all hell breaks loose when you level up, since I'm pretty sure that's just a super meteor buff that's what the meteor spell should be. And so I'm curious now, what's the most fun but not necessarily good build that you've actually managed to win a run with in Death Must Die? Be sure to let me know down below. And if you're looking for something else to watch, maybe you want a fun build, check out Auto Bomber Averon, or you want a really strong build, check out Summoner Maris. I'll link to both of those up in the card and down below. With that said, thanks for watching. A special thanks to my patrons and channel members for the continued support. For $5 a month, you can see your name here, just like these fine folks. And that's all for me today. Thanks again for watching. Hope you learned something, or at the very least had fun with a light show, and I'll see you again sometime soon. Also, I apologize for bringing up Game of Thrones and reminding you that Season 8 existed.